Hey everybody, welcome back to the homestead. Steven here with another Nature's Always Right video. Today I'm going to show you how I'm making biochar from a bunch of leftover branches that I had piled up from cutting down a bunch of dead trees and starting to thin out my woods and make them a lot healthier. And a lot of people who have some acreage, they end up with a lot of different burn piles, and many people just burn it and it'll just turn all to ash. But if you guys have seen any of my other biochar videos, you know how amazing this is for your garden. So if you'd like to learn more about what biochar is and more of the details of all of it, check out my other videos. I'll put a link in the description. Today we're just gonna make it from my leftover brush. And I've copied sort of what a couple other videos, what they did online to help me try to achieve a better biochar burn. So I'll put those in the description as well too if you want to learn more about this. But basically I chose an area right here. There's no trees around it, so there's no chance of catching other things on fire. The ground's pretty wet. And I chose an area that was kind of cone shaped, and that helps to reflect the heat back into the pile, because what we're trying to achieve is pyrolysis. So we actually light the fire from the top down. What that does is eliminate a bunch of the smoke. It leaves you with less ash and more carbon material at the end. And the reason we want this carbon, this charcoal at the end, is because once we inoculate that by putting it in compost or putting it in compost teas, that will infuse the charcoal, which is basically like a coral reef. It'll infuse it with nutrients, microbes, and it helps to keep water in the soil. And it's just a really fantastic amendment for your garden. So I want to be able to utilize my resources here. I will be chipping a ton of these leftover branches and stuff and making wood chips. But I also, preparing for spring here, I wanted to create some biochar that I could add into my garden as well. So what I did to set up this pile is I want to burn things that are small, so inch and a half in diameter or less. The bigger stuff I can take and I can do either a biochar kiln, or I saw another technique where you just do it in a big trench, and that works better for larger diameter branches. I'm trying to make it not super long pieces, because what I'm trying to attempt to do is just make a big square and stack it high. I don't want this big mound. I didn't do the best job doing it. I was trying to rush to get it done. There's actually a 10-day rainstorm coming, so I want to get this burnt and created before all that comes. So we took all those piles of branches and then we stacked them about 1.5 to 2 foot high at each layer, going one direction, and then stacking going the other direction in layers like that. I think we did 4 or 5 layers. And then from there, I put a bunch of dried leaves and some butcher paper on top to light it from the top. And then that fire travels down and in and sort of creates a vortex going on. I don't know if you can tell, but there's basically no smoke coming off of this fire, and that's what I really want to see. It means that we're gonna store as much of that carbon as we can in the burning material, and it'll become charcoal. Because this wood is a bit green and we could have stacked it a little bit better, I could have chopped up the pieces a little bit more evenly. If they were all the same length, that would have been a better fire. So the next time I'll try to do that even better. And now as this is burning, I'm taking my metal rake and pushing the sides into the fire to keep it going and burning. Once it gets to most of the pile is burnt, there's a timing thing that you have to do where if you let it keep burning, more and more of that wood is going to overburn and turn to ash, and we really don't want that to happen. We want as much of the charcoal material as possible. So once it gets to a certain point, I'm just going to douse that with water, stop the burn. There may be even certain sections that are charcoal first, and I'll wet those down and let the other areas keep burning so I can get the most efficient, most charcoal I can out of this burn. Okay guys, so now it's getting to the point where I'm getting a lot of ash, and some of this bigger stuff, I want to get it away. In this farther corner here, that stuff's all charcoal, so I'm going to try to keep the fire burning over here where all this bigger stuff is that still needs to get burnt. And I'm doing that so that I don't turn more of that pile into ash. There's some bigger little sticks here and logs. I'm gonna pull those guys out. So what I can do now actually is just douse this farther end, and then that will save a bunch of that charcoal for me so I don't get as much ash. When I do this, it's gonna help to activate the charcoal and open up the pores and make it have more pore space and absorb more nutrients. So I'll just give it a little bit of water and see what heats up again. So this is a pretty critical point where you can create a lot more ash and lose charcoal. So especially when you didn't build the fire initially as good as you could have. And that's the key with biochar burns, is making that pile built as well as you possibly can. You know, there's some sticks in here that are way too big in diameter. Once I get through this smaller stuff and there's just bigger stuff left, I will pull them out of the pile altogether, because by the time those turn to charcoal, it'll take way too long and it would mess up the good charcoal we have at the bottom there. Another good thing you can do to check if it's charcoal, if you smash it and it breaks off, it's basically charcoal, it's really close. Charcoal, if you buy some inoculated biochar off, say, Amazon, it's 60 bucks for 5 gallons. So making your own can save you some money, and it's pretty fun to make it too. And there's a lot of uses for charcoal, so just knowing how to create this is pretty powerful. You can filter water with it. It's a major component of gunpowder. All sorts of things. Now at this point, you know, I could take this and strain it, but since I'm just gonna add it to a compost pile, I don't really need to do that. If I was gonna, you know, mix this in with teas and stuff, so anything that, you know, is unburnt, I'm not too worried about it. Okay, so what I'm left with now is about 15 to 20 gallons of biochar, and I still need to keep dousing this. So another thing that you can do with charcoal too at the end is you might want to smash this up more, especially if you were going to be adding this through a tea or inoculating it in tea, and then using it after that. It's much better when it's broken down into smaller particles. And I'm not really worried about picking up some of the dirt or leaf matter or whatever that didn't burn underneath, because I'm just going to be adding this to a compost pile, so it will break down more in that pile and I'm not worried. But if you're going to make tea, like I said, you would want to sift this, add it to water, and then sift it from there so all the heavy material floats to the bottom, and then strain it out. And a little bit of ash in there is not bad either, because that just adds more potassium.
So we ended up getting a full wheelbarrow of charcoal, which is awesome. And it was actually raining that day, so I just put it underneath the roof of my barn and collected a bunch of rainwater. I let it sit for 3 days because biochar is hydrophobic, which means it repels water. So to eliminate that, you want to just soak that in water. If you're charging it or inoculating it through a tea, then that's gonna help with that. So I soaked it for 3 days, and now what I did is I dumped it out into my 2 piles. One of them is completely uncomposted, it's just raw manure and hay. So I just put a little bit out there and then dumped the remaining leftover charcoal juices, essentially. And then I have my main pile, which I'm gonna be using in my gardens once I build them in about a month. So that's a good amount of time for that charcoal to sit in there and actually become biochar. What makes it biochar is bio, meaning life, right? All the different microbiota, fungi, nutrients, water, everything can get inside of it and start making a home, which is going to go out there to my garden to help create really amazing soil. So what I did is, just real simply, I just started dumping the charcoal all around the outside of the pile. I just turned it recently, so I didn't want to go through that whole process again. I might turn it one more time in another week, but the pile has gone cold. It's just sitting at 70 degrees now. My main goal was just to be able to cover all the charcoal with some compost, and then the next time I turn it, that will get it really well mixed and spread out through the pile evenly. So I just dug a couple holes out around the outer edge, threw in the charcoal, covered it, and that's it. And now it'll just sit like this for a month, ready for me to use when I start building my gardens.